Welcome to the Tuva 101 webinar. We're just going to wait for 1 or 2 more minutes to wait for some of the other people who may be running a little bit behind to join us. And while we're waiting, if you have any issues in not being able to hear me appropriately, then let me know via the chat. In addition, if you have any questions, feel free to use the question menu to post the questions, and we have some time allocated towards the end, so we can go through these questions one by one as well. And yeah, I think we'll just wait for a minute, and we'll just jump right in as soon as another 1 or 2 minutes or so. All right, so I think we'll get started. It's 6:04, and on the East Coast here in New York. Okay, so welcome everyone to the Tuva 101 Getting Started with Tuva webinar. My name is Herschel Parikh, and I am one of the founders of Tuva. And the goal for this particular webinar is to go through and share with you some of the sort of overarching features and some of the sort of the core aspects of Tuva. So the agenda for the next 40 minutes or so is we'll talk about Tuva Datasets. We'll sort of go through how to enroll your students, about how to find or create an activity or a lesson related to a data set. And as part of that, we'll talk about the Tuva resources, what we have available right now and what's coming in the very near future. We'll go through a little bit about our dynamic visualization tools, graphing and charting tools. There's a lot to be covered there, but we'll try to do as much as we can. We'll also I'll show you a really powerful feature that we made available earlier last year, which is how to upload your own data. And we're finding this particular feature to be very powerful for students, especially in the context of their science labs. And so we'll go through an example of an actual science lab. We'll talk about Tuva Collections, something that we just actually released last week. I'll give you a quick overview of Tuva Premium, which is our premium product for teachers, schools, and districts. And then we'll end that with questions and answers that you may have from the webinar. So let's get started. And And so I'm just going to go here. And so here we are on the Tuva website, tuvalabs.com/K12. And so the first thing is to go to the Tuva Datasets page here. And as you probably have figured out by now, that each one of these blocks that you see here is a data set that we have curated from an authentic source, and we have made available here on Tuva. And what do I mean by authentic primary source? So we reach out to organizations like the Census, NIH, CDC, the World Bank, and plenty of other organizations, and curate data sets that are very interesting, that are tied back to the curricula, that are real world, if you will, and we make them available here on our app. And in addition to reaching out to these organizations, we also have started to work with some of the leading museums and research institutes around the country, such as the Monterey Bay Aquarium, Gulf of Maine Research Institute, and many others, to unlock some of the local data sets that are relevant to these communities. Northern California, in the case of Monterey Bay Aquarium, Maine, the entire state of Maine, and those kinds of examples. And we're hoping to do a lot more of these kinds of collaborations with other museums and research institutes around the country. So one of the first things to think about when it comes to the data sets that we have available is when you hover on one of these data sets. Let's hover on this one, which is the GMOs, pesticides, and bee population in the United States data set. So when you hover on it, one of the first things you'll notice is we have some information available regarding this data set. So what you see here is 75 cases, 11 attributes, and it says, each case represents a year. And the source of this particular data set is the United States Department of Agriculture. So this is important because what this is telling you is that this particular data set has 75 data points. So a case in Tuva lingo is representing one row in a data set. So and this particular data set also has 11 attributes. So we'll keep that in mind, and you can sort of go through this and see the kind of the size of the data set before you even dive in. So this particular data set about land animals has 30 rows and has 5 attributes. The one about pets, very small, really appropriate for younger students, only 4 data points and 9 attributes. And there's some others that are larger, right? This one from Gulf of Maine Research Institute about green crab data has over 2,600 cases and 5 attributes, and and things like that. So this particular information that we've made available for you on Hover is to give you an idea of sort of how big is this data set. Does it have 50 rows or 50 cases? Does it have 500 cases, or does it have over 5,000 cases? To give you a sense of scale of the data set. So one of the first things you'll see is that as part of the Tuva Basic Plan, we have 25 data sets that we make available for you completely for free to use, and we'll go through sort of which ones are not in 25 and which ones are. But the main thing to see is that we have 25 that are completely available for free, and then we have an encyclopedia of over 300 data sets today covering a wide array of topics that we make available as part of the premium subscription. And what you see up here is a filter bar. And the filter bar right now allows you to filter for data sets by the subject as well as the grade. But very soon, based on the feedback that we've gotten from teachers like you, we're going to be sort of bringing some additional superpowers to this filter bar, allowing you to filter by the size of the data set. In the case of NGSS, which where there's a tremendous amount of focus on NGSS, again, based on just the needs of science teachers around the country, we're going to allow for filtering by an NGSS standard. We also have sort of many data sets that are in language outside of English, so lots of Spanish data sets. We also have some Arabic data sets. So we're going to have some additional filters coming in the very near future, and that's, so look out for an update via our newsletter and a blog post about sort of the new superpowers into this filter bar. As always, our search function is very powerful as well. So you can always, type in a concept or a topic that you're looking for in terms of the data set, and you'll be able to find it. So for example, let's say we want to find environment-related data sets. You type in environment, press enter, and boom, you get all the data sets that that are related to the topic of environment, and there's plenty of them. So, I encourage you to sort of use both the search bar up top as well as the filter bar over here. So let's log in. So we're going to log in first. I'm going to log in as a teacher. And once I log in, we'll come back to the data sets, but I think, we should take a moment and go to the dashboard first to talk about how to enroll your students. So this is your dashboard, and it's right now it's pretty simple. You can create any number of classes as you would like as part of even your Tuva basic plan, and you can go here to add a class and input in what grade level, give it a section name, whether it's period 1, period 2, period 3, whatever you really would like, and add that class. And so I've got in my Tuva account right now 3 classes: 7th grade, period 5, 7th grade, period 3, and 10th grade, period 2. And what you'll notice is that each class has a unique class code that you can find right here. And you can actually, when you create the class, we'll also send you an email with your class code. And so the easiest way to enroll your students, and the most sort of efficient way to do this, is to distribute this class code to your students once you have created the class. And ask the students, when they're signing up, to input this class code. So you can just put it up on your board, and what will happen is students will automatically, as soon as they enter this class code, will be entered into your class here on Tuva. So the enrollment is pretty easy once you recognize that there's a class code associated with each one of your classes. And you can just share that class code with your students based on their period or based on their section, and they can very easily, they'll automatically be placed in the right section. So if you're also, you may have noticed if you're a Google Apps for Education school, we have a login with Google functionality, so that makes it very easy for schools or districts who are using Google Apps for Education, and that's another way to have your students create their Tuva accounts. So let's, so that's a little bit about how to enroll your students. And we have video tutorials about this as well, which I'll share with you towards the end of the webinar in our resources section. And we'll talk about that as well. One of the things that you'll see here in your dashboard outside of your classes is the activities that you have assigned to your students. You have some alerts in case if you created a class, you have an alert here. So I just created a class in preparation for this webinar, and here's my sort of an alert. And then what you also see here is a lobby. This is just to give you a sense of what are other students and other teachers, doing, and what kind of activities are they doing on the Tuva platform. So, 74 students began this particular data set, an activity on the greenhouse gas and ocean acidification data set. 19 students yesterday started on a popular pets data set. So, you get some idea of the kind of data sets and activities that other students and other teachers are assigning, and the kind of learning that they're doing on Tuva. So with that, let's start out and dive right into one particular data set. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a data set called regarding the census. There's lots of interesting data sets to explore. The census is an interesting one, really interesting data, and lots to sort of think about, and questions that one can ask. So this is a census data set. This is a data set that we put together in collaboration with the American Statistical Association, and you can get some basic information about this data set on this about the data set section. And if you click out of it, you'll actually get onto the dataset page. And so, what's happening here? So there's sort of three sections to the Tuva dataset. The first section is the actual data. And so you see that here, if you click on the table view, you will be able to see the spreadsheet version, if you will, of this census data. And so what you can see, and if you recall, I mentioned the concept of a case. So each case on the Tuva platform, it represents a row of the data set. So case 1, case 2, case 3, and so in this particular data set, there are 500 cases. The more intuitive way that Tuva allows the students and you to explore the data is via the case card. So the same data that's here in the table view is made available here in the case card. And again, this is a much simpler representation of that data, of the 500 data points. And you can sort of flip through the cards like this, and you can see that each one, and you can see sort of as I move through, the dot on the right side in the middle section represents each one of the cases. And so initially it's randomly scattered, but that's sort of the relationship between the case card and the table view of the data set. This is just much more accessible as compared to the spreadsheet or the tabular way the data is typically organized. So the interesting thing, and we'll come back to the actual tools and how the case card works. What I wanted to first sort of cover is the activity. So alongside the data set, alongside the case card and the tools, on the right side, you'll see activities that are related to this data set. And this particular data set has 6 activities. Some have 1, some have 2. We have some data sets that actually don't have any activities at this point as well. But the way these activities are used is that you can find an activity that is appropriate for your particular need. And so the way you would get started is you would, for example, check out this Step into Statistics activity. You can actually just try it out here and get a feel for what this activity will look like for your students. You can actually do the activity yourself. And you can see, how many questions there are, how long it will take, what are the kinds of questions we're asking, and things of that nature. And then once you've actually gone through the activity yourself, you can say, this is going to be really useful, and this is going to be a really great activity to do in my class tomorrow. So, let me go ahead and just assign it to my students. So I can go back to my Step into Statistics activity. I like it, and I can press the Assign button. And now, depending on the classes that I've created, all of them will show up here, and I can just, click on this button, Assign to Period 2, and it will virtually assign that same activity, Step into Statistics, to all your students. The question one may ask is, well, how can I, what if I want to make changes to this activity? I like it, but I want to add some things, I want to subtract some things, I want to, make some changes. So what you can do then is, instead of assigning it right away, you can go to this button, you can say copy and modify. And so what that will do is that we will create another copy of this activity, and it will we can allow you to modify it. So if you click on copy and modify, what will happen is that same activity, the Step into Statistics, is there, and now you can actually make your own changes to this activity. You can amend some questions, you can add some questions, and then once you're happy with the changes, you can update it, and that will also be made available to you. So it's a very useful feature we have, in that you don't just have to use the activities that we have, you can make changes to it. And in fact, let's say if you don't like any of these and you want to create something of your own, you can just press the Create Activity button, and that too will allow you to create your own activity and save it. So that's the Create Activity feature, or the Copy and Modify feature that we have. So let's, if we were to start thinking about how can I, as a learner, start digging into this data set? So this data set, as we know, has 500 data points, lots of attributes. In this case, we have, if we go to the About the Data Set pop up here, we have 21 attributes, so lots of attributes. And so, what if I want to get a feel for what this data is about? What are some interesting things for me to be looking at? The first thing, to be able to do is to realize that there's a drag and drop functionality where you can drag the attributes. Let's say I'm going to drag the gender attribute and I can place it on the x-axis. And I can now sort of see the number of females and males in this particular data set. And I can actually get a count. So this button with 3 lines is the functions button, and this is where you can find all the numerical functions as well as some of our drawing functions are also available here. So I can get a count, and I can even get a percentage. And so it's very close. 249 females to 257 males. And you may be wondering, well, that doesn't equal 500. Well, it turns out that you see here, there are 4 data points, 4 cases where this particular information is missing. So that's, if you're looking for data set that's missing, or if you've filtered out the data, you'll find that information here on the right side. So it happens in this particular survey, 249, there were 249 females, there were 247 males, and then 4 participants chose not to indicate their gender, which is fine. The other things to sort of think about, so this is a dot plot, I think you may have already explored these tools before, but we have a number of sort of foundational graphing and charting features. So we have the dot plot, we have the line graph, which is great for time series data set. So looking at how a particular attribute has trended over time. So line graphs are great for that, and we'll actually look at a data set very, very briefly about it. If you're looking at numerical data, then other graph types that are appropriate are the box plot. So we have the box plot with outliers, and box plot and dot plots are very simple. Let's say we graph the height attribute, it's a numerical attribute, and so now we get our height distribution. And if you're covering the concepts of box plot in your class, the box plot is a great way to look at the numerical attributes. That's the box plot of heights. You can also have the box plot with dot plots, so you can see how that sort of features up. And so the box plot is a great way. And then another one, of course, is the histogram. And so the histogram is actually sitting underneath the bar button, but histogram is also a great way to study a numerical attribute. So there are 4 chart types we have to study numerical attributes. There are the dot plot, line graph, the histogram, and then the box plot. In case you're covering and we're comparing groups, males versus females, or those who like mathematics versus science, the students who like math versus science versus English. So when we're comparing groups, the appropriate visualization choices are bar charts, and we actually have sort of 3 different kinds of bar charts. We have a bar chart, a stacked bar chart, and a stretched bar chart, and I'll cover each one of these very briefly. And then the other one is the pie chart. So let's say we wanted to study the favorite music, and we want to do that as a pie chart. I'm going to create a pie chart, and then I'm going to click on favorite music. And so now I have a quick view of how many students are interested in the, and this is actually showing the percent. I don't need to show the percent. I don't need to even show the totals. I just need to show the counts. So what I did there is I created a pie chart, and then I got the count totals or count cases, percentage of cases. So this is the way, and if I wanted to study like which is the largest section, turns out that this particular one is a section that has the highest amount of participants who like this music. So that's rap and hip hop, and so I can sort of click that here, and you can see that particular graph is highlighted. So we have, for comparing groups, we have the pie chart and three different kinds of bar charts, stacked bar chart, and stretch bar chart. And as I mentioned in the beginning, there's really a number of other features, including here the standard deviation. There's a least squares line. So the least squares line is wonderful if you wanted to do the correlation versus association concept. So for example, what is the relationship between the arm span and the height of the individuals, of the students? If we graph the arm span on the x-axis, we have the height on the y-axis, and now we can sort of study, is there a strong association between the arm span and height? And it appears to be, and we can ask then students to create sort of their own line. And so they can go, create a movable line. This is sort of a line of best fit, kind of an exercise. And then they can go in and look at that and get their equation. So height is 0.94 times arm span plus some sort of a intercept. And then you can ask the students to actually compare that with the actual answer of the least squares regression line, which is this blue one that you see here. And so, a really easy way, a really powerful way for students to understand the concepts of y equals mx plus b, slope and independent variable and dependent variable. And so this is an activity for a mathematics classroom. So there's a lot to be said about the particular visualization charts, and over the course of the coming weeks, we actually are planning to have another webinar dedicated just on these tools. So I don't want to spend too much time on them. As I said, there's a lot to cover, but hopefully you got a feel for the different visualization options we have. There's a filter options. There's also ability to sketch and draw. So if you wanted to, students to draw a particular graph, they can do that. And there's also the ability to save a graph, download a graph, things like that, and turn it into a report. There are lots of sort of different features that we have for students to explore and analyze and visualize the data. So let's as we have sort of looked at that, I think the major sort of next thing is once the students are used to and are familiar with the Tuva tools, the next natural request for many of them is, hey, can I upload my own data from my lab? And so if you go to the My Datasets tab over here, we have a feature where you can upload your own data, or your students can upload their own data that they've collected as part of a science lab or as part of a project or things like that, and use the Tuva tools to upload this data into their own sort of repository on Tuva. And so the way we do that is, so I've got a sample sheet here. What's sort of the format to keep in mind? And this is sort of the main thing that's really important, is that when you're uploading the data from a spreadsheet, let's say an Excel or a Google spreadsheet, the thing to keep in mind is we have a sample sheet that shows the students, what kind of format does Tuva accept? And this is something that's important, because if they don't get it right, then the data that's uploaded doesn't really make sense to them. So the first thing to know is that the attribute that you want to plot is on the first row of the spreadsheet. And so we have attribute 1, attribute 2, attribute 3, and going beyond. And then after that, and you obviously don't want any spaces, so they all have to be in sort of one after the other, without any spaces. And then the subsequent rows 2 and beyond, are the actual measurements that you have taken for a particular lab experiment. So this is a sample sheet. Here's a real example of a science lab on studying gravitation. This is for a physics classroom, and here what you see is the way the students recorded the data. So they recorded the height, the mass of the bottle, the height of the bottle, the time that it took to fall, average speed of the object, the initial speed, the final speed that they were able to measure, and hence acceleration. And so this is an example of the kind of data that a student would collect as part of their science lab that they can very quickly upload to Tuva to visualize and analyze and graph it and plot it and things like that. So the way you do that is you can import this from Google Drive, or you can sort of use this function to to select it from your computer. So if you have an Excel file, you can use this particular function. I'm just going to import it from Google Drive very quickly. And so, here, as soon as I click on Google Drive, it'll ask you for your credentials. And once you authenticate, once you put in your login and username, you'll be able to find your particular spreadsheet. So I'm going to just select the gravitational acceleration spreadsheet. And here we go. So as I expected, this is my data. There's only 9 cases. Here's my case card, again with the 9 cases. And now I have this data in front of me, and then very quickly I can explore the different heights in this particular different weights, actually, not the heights, in this particular experiment. So we're looking at 3 different kinds of weights: 200, 300, 400. The big question we're asking in this lab is, does the weight impact the acceleration of the bottle as it falls, right? So you have 3 different bottles, each weighing 200 grams or 300 grams or 400 grams, and the students are dropping it and are measuring how long it takes for the bottle to reach the ground, and is that impacted by the mass? So we have 3 different masses: 200 grams, 300 grams, 400 grams, and we can then sort of take the mass, put it here on the x-axis. We've got 3 categories now: 200, 300, 400. And if you notice, one of the things that I did was I went into this card here and I changed the way I look at the attribute from numerical to categorical. And so this allows me to compare categories of 200, 300, 400 gram water bottles. And I plot the acceleration on the y-axis. And I can then calculate the mean acceleration. And so this is one way for students to study that. If you look at, let me just, to make it simpler, switch the axes. So what I just did, I pressed this button to swap the x and y axis. So acceleration was on the y, now it's on the x. Mass was on the x, now it's on the y. And so what we have here is 200 grams, 300 grams, 400 gram bottle, and the acceleration, the mean acceleration for 400 grams is 9.71, for 300 grams is 9.87, and for 200 grams is about 9.7. And so now the big discussion for students can be is that, why is there some variability? It seems to be that it's close to 9.8 or so, but there's some differences, though small, with their measurements. And so we can talk about human error versus calculation error, things like that. But this is an example of how your students can very quickly upload their data that they've collected as part of a lab, or you yourself have some favorite data sets or things like that. We have plenty of teachers who use this particular feature to upload their own data, and this is sort of a quick way of doing that. One of the things that I did want to cover was the privacy settings. So if you go back to the My Datasets tab, here you will see the privacy. And so we have 2 privacy settings. Only me, which is by default, which means that nobody else will have access to that data set, or you can choose to do anyone with the link, which means that if you share this link, that link of the data set, then anybody else would have access to it if you shared it with them. But by default, it's an only me privacy setting. And this it's never really been a big problem in that, because it's by default. But in case you wanted to create a data set and share it with your students, you would upload it, you would give it a title, and you would choose anyone with the link, and you can then share that link with the students. And if you want to find the data set you've just uploaded, so if I go to My Datasets, here's my gravitational acceleration experimental data, and here it is in my repository again. Here's the link that I was actually referring to, and so you can share this link with your students if you would like. So that's a note about the privacy settings on the My Datasets page. So it's already sort of 6:35, 6:40. We're getting close to time where I would like to leave some for some questions. But there are two more things that I wanted to cover with you. So we've looked at the dashboard briefly and the how to add your class and how to assign activities to your students. We've looked at Tuva Datasets, and we talked about a little bit about how we have 25 datasets that you can find that are for free, and they're across a wide variety of topics. And then we have, as part of our premium subscription, an entire encyclopedia of datasets. Right now we have over 300, and we're adding more and more on a week-to-week basis. And as I said, keep a lookout for a much more powerful version of the filter bar that's coming up very soon that will allow you to filter not only by the subject and the grade level of the data set or the activity, but also by the standard, by the language, and by the size of the data set. So let's say if you wanted to find data sets that are small, only about 30 or 40 cases, you will be able to do that very soon. And if in case you wanted to look at all of our data sets in one view, we also have a list view. So here it is. You can just see all the data sets that we have organized in alphabetical order and the category that they are in. So you can search by category. There's some community-focused data sets. There's history-focused data sets. There's cultural-related data sets, lots of science data sets, lots of sort of global issues-related data sets. And really, we run the gamut of the kinds of data sets that, around authentic, meaningful issues that you can bring to your students. And so we'll talk through that, and we'll always be sending newsletters out about some of the new data sets that we have available, things like that. One of the things that I did want to cover is collections. So collections is something that we launched last week. So collections are basically groups of activities and data sets that we've put together around a particular theme, usually in collaboration with another high, sort of very well-reputed institution or a educational organization. So an example of some of the collections that we have available is, this one is called Civic Literacy Through Data. So this particular collection of activities and lessons is all about giving your students an opportunity to critically think about the social and economic justice issues that exist in our society, but they do that all through the lens of data. And it's, in this case, it's a U.S. Census data from 1850 to 2000. And this is, we're developing this particular collection with the Democracy Prep charter schools that's based here in New York City. Another one collection that we have, this is for the math teachers and the science teachers, called the Model Shop. And this is all about giving students an opportunity to master the concept of linear modeling and linear functions. And this particular data set, we have a number of activities and lessons and data sets all related to modeling in this particular collection. A third one is on the history of the United States. So it's called Science of Change. And this particular collection is a series of activities and lessons that give the students an opportunity to learn and discover phenomena in the United States. Again, things like the Civil War, the gold rush to California, the Cuban migration, the women's equality issues, many of Vietnam War, lots of different topics that we'll be making available as part of the Science of Change collection. Again, all through the U.S. Census data. And so these collections are part of the Tuva Premium subscription, and you keep an eye out for many more collections that we're going to be releasing over the course of the school year and into the summer around science topics and other civics and history topics and things of that nature. So lots of sort of wonderful collections coming, really showing and giving you the opportunity to bring in inquiry-based, really meaningful, really sort of important issues in front of your students, all aligned to your standards, and really giving them an opportunity to critically think about data, critically think about these topics. And I think in addition, be able to go through the practices that are so important for all the standards, whether it's the Common Core standards, whether it's the Next Generation Science standards, the practices of how to provide evidence to support your argument, practices of how to analyze and interpret data, how to model, how to solve problems, how to critically think about information. All of these practices that are so critical for our students are sort of can be brought to life in a very meaningful way through these collections. And as a last sort of note, there is, I'm just going to log out here and just cover the Tuva Premium. So we have two plans for Tuva. So we have the Tuva Basic, which is accessible completely for free to get you started with 25 Tuva datasets, 5 dataset uploads, and some of the other features that I've shown you. We also have a premium sort of product that we offer to, and then the premium plan is we have plans for teachers. So if you have a group of science teachers or a group of math teachers or sort of a cohort of teachers, if you will. We also have plans for schools. So one of the most common ways schools choose to purchase Tuva is across the school. So unlimited number of students, all the teachers, and really that's the power of the tools and the power of bringing this kind of cross-curricular learning is appropriate across different subject areas. And so our schools plan is the most popular one. And then we also have a plan for districts, which is for sort of a bulk purchase. And in the premium version, what you get is all of our data sets, our entire encyclopedia of today, it's 300 plus data sets. You get sort of full access to our premium content, including the collections that we just talked about. Unlimited dataset uploads for you and all your students. So if we see, we have students who will upload 5 to 10 datasets on a given week for a particular lab that they have done. And so if you want to give your students unlimited dataset uploads, then the premium subscription is a great way to do that. Dataset request. So this is a very popular feature where teachers can send in requests for specific datasets that they are interested in covering with their students around a topic that we may not be covering today or we may not have on in our data sets today, but that's really important to you. So that's a feature that we make available. Onboarding for your entire school or all your students. And then there's some detailed data on progress and growth at the student level as well as the class level, and then dedicated email support 24/7. So that's what we offer as part of a premium plan. And if you're interested, I'm happy to send you additional information about it. And again, we'll be adding more and more details about the Tuva Premium subscription. And there's some that we already have in our FAQ section, but if there are other questions that you have, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at any time if you have any questions about that. And so, I think we have about 15, 18 minutes, which is pretty good point for me to stop. And if you have any questions, let's start digging into those. All right, so let's see. Hi, Steve. Glad that you're here as well. So I'm just going to go through all the questions. So Martin has a question, which is, will everything you're showing here also be supported on an iPad or will in a browser, or will you have an app? Right, so Martin, it's a great question. And at the moment, we have lots of teachers and students accessing Tuva through the browser on their iPad. And it is completely accessible via the iPad browser. We, at the moment, do not have a dedicated app. That's something that is on the horizon, but at the moment we don't have it. But your students can fully access the data sets and the tools through the browser. There's a little bit of a lag just because of the limited capability of the browser on the iPad, but it's not a major issue. And we find lots of students are able to easily access it via an iPad browser or other tablets that they might have. as well. And this is, for those of you who have access to Chromebooks, this works really well on a Chromebook environment as well. And so that's the additional, in case that's what you're using. And again, any browser is great, but we prefer Google Chrome or Firefox or Safari. Internet Explorer will work, but it will cough up some issues, and that's sort of a backward compatibility issue. So hopefully that answers your question. Let's move on to the next question. Christine, is the My Datasets part of the premium or part of the free account? So the My Datasets feature, which allows you and your students to upload their own datasets, is part of Tuva Basic. So it is part of the free Tuva. The limitation, though, that we have had to put in is that you can only upload 5 datasets maximum before we have to sort of put a lock on it. And that's because we saw, at some point last year, we had hundreds and hundreds of data sets were uploaded on a daily and weekly basis. And this was a feature that we had to really really think carefully about. So yes, you can upload your own data into the Tuva repository. Your students can as well, to a maximum of 5. But if you want the unlimited number of data sets, then the premium subscription comes in. So hopefully that answers your question, Christine. Yeah, so Sarah is asking us about, will you be giving pricing details? So yes, I'm happy to share the pricing on the Tuva Premium subscription. We have so it says average pricing. What we really, as in how we start working with our particular schools or teachers or districts, what we end up finding is that we end up customizing the Tuva subscription for their needs that best fit their needs. In many cases, schools want to purchase the subscription for the entire school. And so an average price for a subscription of Tuva Premium for the entire school, which includes all the teachers and students, is around $2,500 USD. And then there's some sort of changes to it up and down depending on the size of the school, if it's a large high school versus a small middle school, or things of that nature. So, but on average, it's about $2,500 USD. We also have per teacher and group pricing available, and again, that depends on if you want the Tuva if you want the Tuva Premium subscription for 4 teachers versus 10 teachers versus 15 teachers. What we do recommend is if a department, a science department, is purchasing the Tuva Premium subscription for 5, 8, 10 teachers, then it makes complete sense just from a simple sort of multiplication perspective that the school purchase the subscription for the entire school. Just because what you will find is that your students will love using the Tuva tools for their science class, but then they might want to use it for a project, they might want to use it for a research study that they're doing, they might want to use it for another classroom. And by purchasing the subscription for the school, it gives them full access without any issues. So we do have plans, Sarah, that are dependent on the number of teachers, and then there's also a sort of a customized plan for districts as well. So hopefully that answers your question, and I'm happy to follow up with you over in more detail with emails. But hopefully that gives you a sense of the pricing that we have available for the Tuva Premium subscription. All right, so next question by Kim. Can you create activities for the data sets that you personally upload? So this is a feature that this request has been sent to us by a few other teachers as well, Kim. So this is something that we're considering, but it's a tricky situation in terms of quality control. How do we, we obviously want to ensure that if other teachers are finding activities that are created by others, then there's a sense of quality there. So this is something we're thinking about, and I can assure you that in the near future we'll come up with some sort of a solution for this particular request, because I can totally see the value of it. It's something that we have heard from other teachers as well. What we can do though is, and we've done this before with other teachers, is if you have a data set that you'd like to create an activity around, then we would love to, if it makes sense, if it's a data set that's potentially going to be useful for other teachers in the Tuva community, then please reach out to us, and we would love to work with you to make that data set available as part of our bank of data sets. And that's just to be able to bring and share that data set with others in case there's interest for them as well. So that's something we have done with plenty of other teachers before, where they had a data set on the Arby's menu, for example, is a data set that we got from a math teacher in Indiana. And it's a very interesting data set to look at sort of calories and nutritional values of the different items on the menu of Arby's. And it's a wonderful way to sort of do a math lesson, but around a really meaningful, real sort of real world topic like Arby's. So that's an example of how a teacher and us collaborated to send to make the data set available to a larger audience. So I've taken note of this, and this is something we're very thinking about internally, and hopefully we'll be able to share more details about how we may be able to do this, or sort of what are the ways to get around if we aren't able to make this feature available. Next question from Martin. Do you support any probability tools, for example, creating simulations, also showing random sampling from a larger data set? Yeah, so this is a great question, really about sort of bringing in probability-focused features, as Martin, as you mentioned, around creating simulations or random sampling. And so these are actively in development. And again, this is primarily for the statistics teachers, but we certainly have gotten additional requests around this before. So all I can say right now is that it's in our queue of for our team to design and develop tools to allow for teaching and learning probability concepts, and the ones that you've highlighted around creating simulations and being able to have a random sample from a larger data set are two really critical features. And so we have them on our list, and please stay tuned on how we can make them available or when we can make them available. That's something that certainly we have on our, if you will, our queue of the different features that we want to create. And by the way, just last comment there is we have a community feature where I highly encourage all of you to request additional features or request additional data sets or ask any questions that you may have outside of the webinar. We're very active on the community page. It's a space for you and other teachers to share ideas pedagogically about a specific data set, about a specific lesson, about a specific concept that you may have trouble or you may want to sort of share ideas around. So, please feel free to use the community feature to post some questions, post some requests. It's a great way for us to learn about these things outside of this kind of a webinar environment. So hopefully, Martin, that sort of answers your question. So Steve asked a question about, he's neither a science teacher nor a math teacher. Your discussion about view serves which type of data best? Dot, line, pie, bar, etc. was fascinating. Is that information consolidated somewhere on your site? Steve, this is a wonderful point. I think this is a very powerful thing that it's actually quite difficult for sometimes students to learn. And so yes, we are in the process of sort of putting together a graph choice, a diagram, or sort of a one-pager, if you will, that will hopefully be a lookup table for your students and for yourself and for everybody, all of us, to say, if I'm looking at numerical data, what are the kinds of graphs that I should be creating? Versus if I'm looking at comparing two groups, what are the kinds of graphs that I should be creating? And so we are designing and working on that with our content team. So again, please keep on the lookout for it. It's in the works, and we hope to share it with everyone soon. And this is going to be, I think, a very helpful feature for us internally. We have developed it over the course of putting together 300 data sets, that some kinds of visualizations, like a box plot or a histogram, is great for numerical attributes, whereas some others, like pie chart and a stretch bar chart or a stacked bar chart, is really appropriate to compare and look at groups of groups within your data. So it's a great point, and something that we're actively working on, and we hope to share it with the entire Tuva community, and I think that the educator community writ large, about that kind of thinking and how to sort of think about creating visualizations very quickly and what's the right form and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. Let's move on to the next question. Sarah is asking, how many students can a teacher enroll in a class? Is there a limit? There is no limit to the number of students that you can enroll in a class. There's no limit that we have, but assuming you have a class of 25 to 30 students, all these students can enroll in the class via the class code, as we talked about. So hopefully that answers your question there. Steve has a comment about the graphic transitions between visualization modes. And I think, I'd like to take this opportunity to highlight, how we've developed these tools. And these tools are based on over 25 years of research on how students learn and interpret about data and statistics. There's a very deliberate reason why we start off with the tools. So, here in this case, the GMO data set, I'm just going to talk through it very quickly. Why we start off in such a randomized state where each data point is represented as a dot or a circle, and then as and how you grab and start sort of grabbing attributes and placing them on the axes, the circles sort of move with them. And the reason for that is for students to visually see that graphical representations of data is just that. It's just data coming together in specific ways and shapes and sizes in different forms, so whether it's a circle or a bar or a line or a pie or things like that. And that visual transition is very critical for them to understand that, a bar graph and a pie chart are really just different representations of the same data. And so students are able to learn that by visually seeing that a bar breaks down and then each one of those data points transitions into a pie and then comes back together. And that allows them to learn that a bar graph and a pie chart aren't just magic, but they're underneath, it's just the same data organized differently. And being able to visually see it is really the way they're able to connect the two kinds of visualization. So it's just a comment on the underlying research that has been done over the years by some of the most sort of, some people who have been thinking about this stuff for quite some time, really about how to make data accessible and how to make this kind of learning and thinking and exploring really easy for students so that they're able to do it and they're able to make sense of it. And if they make mistakes, again, the Tuva environment really allows for explorations. If you make a mistake, you can use the undo function or the redo function, or you can just reset the environment and start all over again. And that sort of freedom to make mistakes and explore and come up with different visualizations is part of the learning, and really that kicks off discussions among the students and within the class that are fascinating and just really, really engaging. So it's a comment on just the underlying learning science and the theories of learning around the way we have constructed these tools. Christine is asking, what kind of questions can you ask in the activities? So this is a very good question. The kinds of, right now, we have support for open-ended questions. So there's some short answer type questions. You can ask a question and really ask your students to explain their thinking. And then, again, keep an eye out. Very soon, we're going to allow for multiple choice questions, sort of forced true and false type of questions. But really, those are always going to be sort of the easier ones, if you will. But really, the way to gauge if your students are understanding the concepts and are thinking about the data in front of them and the question that you've asked is to, give them an opportunity to briefly explain their reasoning, look at a visualization and interpret what's happening. How do they interpret it? What do they see? And how do they make sense of it? So, you can ask open-ended, short answer kinds of questions. And very soon you'll also be able to ask um, multiple choice questions, true false questions, and things like that. So we have multiple item types that are supported. We're transitioning and introducing them slowly just because these are new features that we have built over the last few weeks, and we want to ensure that they're fully tested before we make them available for the entire community. Okay, so if there are any other questions, there will be a recording that we'll make available of this particular webinar. We also have a number of so if you, as you notice, this was a fairly generic webinar, not necessarily diving into specific content areas like mathematics, middle school math, or high school mathematics. There's also a tremendous interest and with the next generation science standards. And so there is a in the upcoming weeks, we are planning to have host additional webinars that will go deeper into specific content areas, including math and science, and I think after that history and sort of social sciences. So if that's if you're a teacher teaching one of these topics, if you're a science teacher or math teacher, or really sort of regardless of the subject area you're teaching, if you're interested in sort of diving into the content area and how Tuva in particular can be appropriate for you to use regularly with your students for your subject area, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And to just sort of cap off on what we have discussed today, there are other webinars coming, so we'll be sending out a newsletter about them. Again, we'll host them right around this time, and maybe we'll see. So if there are other times that make sense. And in terms of reaching out to us, you can reach out to me directly at herschel@tuvalabs.com. If you run into any issues, if you have any questions about a data set, about one of the functions or things like that, reach out to us at support@tuvalabs.com. And you can always find us on Twitter as well at tuvalabs. So any questions that you may have about what we've discussed today, or as you use Tuva with your students, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at any time, and we'll be in touch with more webinars and additional information. If you have any questions beyond, and as we end this webinar, please feel free to send us an email as well. So that's we're right at 7:04, so exactly an hour. So if you don't have any other questions, I think this is the end of our Tuva 101 Getting Started with Tuva webinar. I hope this was helpful, and thank you so much again for taking the time out of your busy schedule during the middle of the week to learn about Tuva and our tools and content and data sets. Looking forward to hearing from you, and see you next time. Thank you so much.